I'm Ruth Craddock.
I'm Rae Davidson. Welcome to Paperback Flicks.
Hi, my name is Ruth Craddock, or RJ Craddock, however you want to call me. That's my author name. And I'm here with Rae Davidson. I want to call her Gordon because I've known her so long. We knew each other when we had different names. Hi, Rae.
Hi.
Hi. So what we're doing here, this is Paperback Flicks. This is our first episode. Yay! Or maiden voyage of such. And what we do here is we read books that have been made into movies, and we watch the movie adaptations, and we sort of evaluate them and talk about our experience with both and what we liked about each medium. And yeah, and then we goof off and we talk to each other because that's what we're here.
And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, whatever happens, happens. Rae, what book are we talking about today?
Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or the Philosopher's Stone.
I didn't realize I had a different name as I was looking up stuff, and I was like, wait a second, it's a Philosopher's Stone? Which one is it? I'm so confused.
Yeah, the UK version is Philosopher's Stone, and for some reason they made it, when they printed the American version, they made it Sorcerer's Stone.
Apparently they didn't think we understood what the word philosopher means.
Right. It's funny because they mention it in the movie, like they go back and forth.
Oh, really? Okay. I didn't notice that. So when did you first read this book?
I first read it in like 2005 when I was in the hospital waiting to have a baby.
Oh, there you go. That's a good time.
But I saw the movies way earlier. I actually worked at the movie theater when the first 3 movies came out. So
that's cool. I did not know that. Very neat. Yeah, I didn't read the book until just now. I just finished it today. When it came out, I was 15 when it came out, I think. And I was living with my sister, Becky, and she read the book and she really liked it. And she was trying to push me to read it. She gave me the paperback. And at the time I was too cool for school. And like, I didn't read middle grade or YA books. Like I read from Goosebumps to Dickens. Like I did nothing in between. So I always told myself, well, okay, someday I'll read it when I have kids. And then I had kids and I kept trying to read it with them for like Halloween. I started at the beginning of October. And we would only get so far before we would get out of the habit. So I never finished it.
So my oldest daughter, how I said I was in the hospital, like waiting to have a baby. I ended up spending the entire month of October living in the hospital.
Oh, and, that's right, huh?
Yeah, and so the hospital has like 4 channels, and 2 of them are like news, and then one of them was ABC Family at the time. I have no idea what it's called now, but it was ABC Family at the time. And because it was October, they kept playing the first 3. The 4th movie was about to come out. And so they kept playing the first 3 movies every day.
Oh, wow.
And so like she was born to the sounds of Harry Potter, and it became like a thing. Like we didn't sing nursery rhymes or whatever. We played Harry Potter soundtrack.
That's funny. Answer your thing you said. Yeah, it's not ABC Family anymore. It's Freeform now.
Okay.
It's no longer very family orientated. It's all over the place, but that's what it used to be. Okay, that's really cool. That's funny. Do you sort of have a personal relationship to Harry Potter in a way?
Right. With the first 3 anyway, the first 3 movies.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't have a very personal relationship at all. But so I finally read it and I started watching it with my sons. I've watched it a billion times. I remember watching all the movies when they came out, and I remember the Harry Potter mania, and how like everyone and their dog was like, this is the most amazing books ever. These movies are so great. And like, I'm a weirdo. I don't like getting into things when everybody's into it. Like when it's a trend, I'm the anti-trends person. Like I just don't want the pressure of having to like when everyone else does, because the chances are I won't because everyone else does.
Right. They hype it up too much and then can't be as amazing as they tell you it is.
Yeah, it ruins it. So I want to be able to like watch it or read it or enjoy something when I can just not worry about all these outside influences trying to get to me. But yeah, so I didn't want to read it back then. And I didn't really get the, I kind of got the hype, but it sort of didn't at the same time.
We like you were saying, like we were like 15, 16 when it came to America anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about an 11-year-old boy who's like a wizard in England. Like, okay. Like, and so then when like my little sisters or whatever, when they were like, oh yay, they're making movies of this, I was like, fun. I work at the theater, so I'll probably see it.
Yeah.
And then I was because one of the things that we do is we go in and play the film before we actually show it to the public, and we have to like you have your clipboard and your stopwatch, and you're like waiting to see, oh, at 14 minutes and 7 seconds there was a piece of lint on the film or something.
Oh.
And so we were watching it back when there was film. I guess now it's all digital, but
yeah, that's true.
We were like watching it, but I wasn't paying attention to the movie necessarily. You know?
Yeah.
And so I was like, they're like, oh, was it amazing? I'm like, yes.
Let's watch it again.
Let's go see for yourself.
How did you feel about when you first read it, the book?
So because I had already seen the movie, like usually it's the other way, right? You read the book, and then as you're watching the movie, you're like, that's in the wrong order, or, you know, my favorite character or whatever.
Yeah.
But because I had seen the movies first, like there were some things that made it so easy. Like I would not have pronounced Hermione. When I read it, I'm like, Hermione. Like,
Hermione.
I think I read it like Hermione, and then I'm like, oh, that's Hermione. Like, but yeah, like, so there was some things that the movie actually kind of helped me, like with the accents, and, you know, Hagrid would have confused me because I'm not used to that accent. And so I would have been like hung up on that a little bit, or else I would just kind of skip over his stuff and then miss out on what he was saying.
Yeah.
So that actually helped me.
A lot of what Hagrid says are clues to what you need to know for the whole mystery side of it. So
right.
Yeah. Yeah, same thing for me. I watched the movies. I just barely read the book the first time. I liked the book more than I thought I would. I guess there's just a little bit of a snob in me that thinks I've gotten past that point where I'm like, look down on younger age genres of writing and storytelling. But there's still a part of me that's like, this isn't going to be very good. And I remember when I started reading it those several times in the past, I remember thinking the very beginning of it doesn't feel like a kid's book. It feels like it's well done. And I like the whole sort of seeing things, having things set up through the Dursleys' perspective. Yeah, so that was kind of fun for an adult. But I remember reading it and thinking, I don't see a kid liking this because it's an adult we're talking about. And then they talk about a baby, and it's not until like the next chapter that we meet the kid as like a regular kid. We meet Harry when he's like 10, 11 years old. Mm-hmm. So I remember reading it and thinking, although I thought it was interesting, I could see a kid being really bored by that. It didn't sound like a kid book to me.
I did like that, like when you watch the movie, because it's a visual medium, like the visual and the sounds are at least as important as the actual, like, here's the story we're telling, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so like there are some things that are just different because the movie requires it to be a little bit different, but they held true to the story. However, I liked that in the book, it was an introduction. Mm-hmm. Like everything, you're introduced to a world that you recognize, and you're like, wait a minute, but those guys are dressed weird, or why is there a cat, or whatever, like whatever, like person? Yeah, that cat's reading a map or whatever, and you're introduced. And then like I was thinking about it, and I was like, because I just reread it for this, and I was like, I'm 2/3 of the way through the book before you get into like the capery aspect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas the movie, like, it's also introductory because it's introducing you to Quidditch and to the magical world and introducing the characters. Mm-hmm. But it kind of like right away you can like do a shot where you're like, ooh, that matters, or whatever. The music is like dun, dun, dun. You know what I mean? Yeah,
like there's some clues to like the mystery of what's going on. It's a little more of a mystery in the movie,
right? Yeah. Whereas the book, like, yes, there's some foreshadowing, but you kind of don't know what matters to the caper aspect of it until all of a sudden they're like Snape's leg and the vault was broken into, like, and that's a good 2/3 of the way into the book before that really gets rolling.
Yeah, that's true. So it's all about just establishing where he's at. The thing I like about the book is that we got a lot more of a sense of Harry's upbringing, what his life's been like with his Muggle family up until the point he finds out he's a wizard. And they do a fairly good job with the movie in like trying to condense all those things together. They get rid of the whole introduction with the Dursleys, and it just starts with, you know, them dropping off the baby. But then you miss a lot of the little things that you learned about the Dursleys. And they do a really good job in the movie, don't get me wrong, of sort of just putting it together. But I don't know, it was kind of fun watching the movie after reading it and being like, oh, they took away the best friend and at the birthday party, and or how Harry wasn't even supposed to be there. He's supposed to be babysat by some old lady and reading things about her cats or looking at pictures of her cats or something. Yeah.
Which, you know, further in the story, she matters later. And that was something that I was like, that's one of those foreshadowing things that comes in later.
Yeah, isn't she like the lady in the neighborhood that finds him after the Dementor? And what is that like? That's
like the fifth or
third. Anyways, I'll figure it out. But yeah. So I kind of picked up on that too this time. I was like, I think that's the same lady. That would make total sense. Which is kind of weird in the same way that she knows who he is, but never said anything to him. But that's not her place. But like,
she's kind of keeping him safe, you know what I mean?
Sort of, yeah. So yeah, there were little things like that I liked. You didn't get the sense that Harry's never been to a zoo before in the movie, like you did the book, where like they never take him anywhere, and so this is a big deal. So he's all excited to go, and so I don't know. I feel like that plays more into the feeling of that scene in the zoo, and when he, you know, gets pushed aside and then the glass goes away. I feel like that's just feels like it's earned more, or it's more of a like, something magical happened. Then
big, huge deal in his life, and it completely went haywire.
Yeah, exactly. So I liked that about the book. Also, I liked all the different things that they did with the letters. Like every time they moved Harry to a different place, they're like, the cupboard under the stairs. They're like, do you know where he's sleeping? And then they're like, you can have oh, I forgot his name all of a sudden.
Dudley.
His name is Dudley Dursley. That's forgot that. Dudley Dursley. So Dudley, you could have Dudley's second bedroom for all his broken toys that he doesn't care about. And he's like, but I need this place for all my broken toys. And anyways, so then he gets a letter saying, you know, the smallest bedroom or something. I liked that. I liked that there was like, they don't just know where he's at. They know like where he's sleeping. They're watching you. It's eerie, like it's kind of eerie and magical all together.
Yeah.
And then I kind of liked the sort of the journey they went through to get to the house on the middle of the little islands in the middle of a storm and everything. There was a little more to that. And that was fun. But again, it makes sense. So they condense so much of that down. And it works for the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Generally speaking, having watched the movie and read the book and then watched the movie again, I'm not disappointed in the movie. It did the book justice. It told the story and it gave you like you're in Rowling's magical world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like they did a pretty good job. It was interesting kind of stopping, and my son hasn't read the book, but he wanted to watch the movie again with me. And so because he wanted to watch the movie with me, I had to wait till he was done with like his video games and his homework and everything. So we got started late. So we didn't actually finish the movie, but I have seen the movie before. So I didn't get to finish the last half hour, but it was fun sitting there with him and like, oh, so in the movie, in the book, they did this and they did that. It's like, oh, okay. And one of the things I noticed is, do you know when they find the third floor corridor or whatever the forbidden corridor. And then they go back to the Gryffindor common room. Hermione's all, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to bed for you to think of something else to get us killed or worse, expelled. And then she like goes off into her room. And what's funny is in the book, it makes so much more sense. That line is deserved because it's not just that they happened to get on a stairway that went the wrong way and sent them to the third story corridor. It was because of this big long thing where they went off to duel Malfoy in the middle of the night and meet him in the trophy room. And she was trying to stop them, but she got locked out of the dorm room. And so she had to go with them. And then they were like trying to get back and they accidentally found it. So then when she gets back, they finally get back to the common room. It makes sense for her to say that. Whereas in the movie, it wasn't their fault that they ended where they were. It wasn't Harry and Ron that did it, but in the book, it was their fault. So, like, I always liked the line in the movie, but I liked it maybe less and more when I read the book and I knew what was really behind that line.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, I can see why they took it out. I kind of wanted it there, but it still works the way they did it, you know?
Yeah. I kind of like that Ron's line that gets added in the movie where he's like, she needs to get her priorities straight. Yeah, because that makes it make sense in that scenario.
Yeah.
But I always like that line. I'm like, oh, it's one of my favorites. But
it's not in the book.
If he'd said it in the book, he would have just been being a jerk. You know what I mean?
But in the movie, it makes sort of more sense. Yeah.
Also, I feel like in the movie they became friends a lot faster. Like in the book, like they were not friends. They did not like her. They were not trying to be nice to her at any point. And then the troll like changes everything. It has a line in there that says like, we're friends now because that's what happens when I don't remember how she said it, but it's something like, you know, that's what happens when you go through things like this, you know.
Yeah. There's some things that you go through you can't help ended up liking each other, and you know, battling a troll is one of them. There was something like that. Yeah, it's one of the few times in the book I noticed that they sort of break the fourth wall with the reader. So a lot of times the author, you don't feel the author telling you things as much. Right. And some writers, you'll hear more of that kind of like commentary within the narrative. Right. But that was one of the few moments where she did that. So it really stands out. But I feel like it's still really well done because it makes sense. It sort of says, yeah, when you go through a life-threatening experience, you kind of bond with people, even people you usually like. Hey, you just went through something and no one else will ever understand what that's like, but you know, you. And yeah, but you're right. In the movie, they do become friends a lot faster. It does kind of push that all together really fast. And it worked in the movie before I read the book. Then reading the book, I was like, yeah, you know, it feels more deserved when you have more of that build up. And then, you know, she stops being such a pain in the butt. Like, I can get why they don't like her. I totally could. Like, she's like that friend that you write a note to her and then like, she passes it back with all like your spelling errors corrected. And like, I'll like, yeah, that's the friend. I'm like, I'm not talking to you no more because I have dyslexia and I'm a writer, so it's hilarious. But I misspell things. I'm better as I get older. But like in junior high, a friend did that. I was like, oh my gosh, I hate you. Yeah. Why? Are you trying to make me feel bad? You know what it said? Who cares?
And anyway. I don't have to worry about being that friend because my spelling is the worst ever. I've got 3 kids who have failed their spelling tests for life. And I'm like, that's my fault.
I'm sorry. You have some of my genetics. Yeah. Sorry, kids. So yeah, that's Hermione. She's like that, like stickler friend. And
I feel like I wouldn't have liked her either.
Yeah.
From the movie or the book, I feel like I would be hard pressed to like her.
Yeah. But then like you think about it, she's from a very interesting perspective because she comes from a Muggle family. She's sort of new to this, but like once she figured this out, she was like, I'm going to get into this. And she just absorbed it and she's trying to read everything and she's trying to be the best she can be. But she's like on full steam ahead, like go, 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 go. I'm going to be the best I can. And so she's sort of not having fun at the same time because she's working so hard and she's trying so hard to fit into this world she's suddenly in. but she's forgetting just to make friends and have a good time and get to know people. So like you can kind of see where like she's like, yeah, it was mean of them to say what they said. Yeah, they didn't mean for her to hear that they thought she was a monster, and no wonder she doesn't have friends. But at the same time, she was making it hard for anybody to get close to her. She wasn't putting that effort to getting to know them and being their friend. She was constantly criticizing them, and she was trying so hard just to be so perfect that she wasn't enjoying herself.
Also, there's the dynamic that like, so Ron comes from this huge family, and they haven't really talked about it yet, but I think it's in the next book or so that they mentioned that Hermione's an only child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't talk about it in this book.
Yeah, and so you can see they have extremely different like personality dynamics, and then Harry's kind of like how the Sorting Hat even says, he's like, oh yeah, you have a really strong need to, what is it, find people's approval or something like that, like because the Dursleys hated him, like he was a burden to them, and they became quite burdensome to him, and so he just wants you to like him. He's not going to be mean to you, but he's also not going to stop the friend from talking bad about you because that's his friend and he has one now,
Yeah, so Harry is kind of like in the middle where he's like, he has family, but it sucked. And it wasn't, really good situation. But then you have Ron that's we're like, and Ron's like totally taking it for granted that the mom makes him a sweater every Christmas and that, when she puts her initials in it. And Harry's like, that's so nice. That's so sweet. No one's ever made me a sweater before. And it's like, it's funny because you're like, I'm from a big family. I'm the youngest of 8. And so I get sort of where Ron's coming from. I've been the youngest child that had to go to school after all my siblings, the same elementary and the same junior high. I went to a different high school just so I wouldn't have to do that anymore. But I've been there where you're being compared to your sibling and like either you're like, you're not as good as them or you're nothing like them. And like that pressure you get in school from that.
I'm the oldest of 4, right? But I'm also the smallest. And so I still get hand-me-downs from my little sisters. But so I kind of have both worlds. But yeah, like when I read through stories or through anything, I like to find the people that I identify with. And I really liked that in this case, I identified a little bit with each of the main characters, and also like when I saw the movie with my family for the first time, with my sisters for the first time, I forget which one of them, because that was like longer ago. But I'm like, oh, you're Percy. And I'm like, I'm gonna slap you right in your face. What are you? I'm not Percy. What are you talking about? And she's like, oh, well, as like the older one that's like, I know what to do. And I'm like,
I'm so great. I'm a prefect.
Like, am I Percy? Yeah. Of all the characters, I'd rather be Neville.
That was the other thing that I thought was interesting in the book. Neville, they use Neville so much more, and there's a lot more involvement with him, but it still works in the movie how they sort of condensed a lot of that stuff. But one of the things I wanted to point out is I remember seeing this movie when it first came out. And of course, at the time, this is the top of visual effects and everything. But this time I'm watching it and I'm going, yeah, you can totally tell that Neville is not Neville when he's falling from a statue after falling off of his broomstick. And but there's moments where you're like, oh, that's CG, that's CGI, that's CGI. Whereas nowadays, you can barely even tell the CGI anymore because it's gotten so realistic. But it's funny to look back at these movies that were so cutting edge at their time and there was such good animation then. But now it's like, oh yeah, that's totally old CGI, you know? So it's sort of funny looking back on that, but I still enjoyed it. What are things that you felt like were dealt better in the book than the movie?
So in the book, I felt like I had more of like how Harry is overwhelmed and he's just like constantly like, and now this new thing I have to learn, and now this, where in the movie he doesn't exactly like Mary Sue through everything, but kind of he does. You know what I mean? And they have to do that because they're like, this entire story that took you 4 weeks to read, I don't know how long it took people to read. but having read it before, I got through it in a week, but I don't know. But
the audiobook, so it was a lot easier.
Yeah. But still, like they have to tell you the whole story. And so they were like, look, he was in flying class, and look, he was in charms or whatever. But kind of that, like everything was overwhelming. Diagon Alley was overwhelming, and going to the bank was overwhelmed. Like everything was like, what? In the movie, it was like, wow, that looks cool. Wow, that's awesome. All right, that happened. And they kind of have to like move you along.
Movie along. Yep. They movied along.
Movied along. I like that I could take my time in the book and like, because when I read, I see it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So even though like now I have the movie characters in my head, there are almost entire chapters that are not in the movie that I can see how those actors would have looked in that spot.
They had done those things. Yeah. It is interesting reading a book after you've watched the movie and how different that is versus reading a book and then watching a movie. So I wonder if I would have liked the movies as much if I had read the book first.
I think in this case, I would have, because they did stay true to it. The changes that they made were all changes that made sense to me. Oliver Wood, almost all of his lines are not from the book, and they're some of the best lines. Like when he's talking about the golden snitch, and he's not just like, oh man, it's really little and it's hard to spot. In the book, he kind of just like almost throws that away. And then in the movie, just the way he said it, I'm like, that's the way a high school boy would have said that, damn near impossible to see or something. I don't remember. I can't remember the quote now, but, and then when he is showing Harry the bludger, and he hands him a little bat, and he like Harry whacks it, which he does in the book. But in the movie, he's like, yeah, you'd make a fair beater. And I don't think that was in the book.
I don't think it was, no.
Yeah, that just like little things like that I'm like, see, like he made himself a character.
Yeah, I liked the part where they're going out to play the first game. It's like, yeah, I was nervous my first time when I played too. It's like, well, what was your first game like? It's like, I don't really remember. I got hit by a bludger like 5 minutes in and woke up a week later. And I'm pretty sure that wasn't in the book, but I remember being like, that was awesome. That was hilarious.
Yeah. So in the book, he gives the pep talk, and the twins are like, we know this by heart, which is funny. Oh, that's the other thing. Fred and George have a ton of hilarious lines that didn't make it into the movies. Honestly, that's the thing that I was most disappointed in about the movie. The theme song, the school song, when everybody gets to sing it to their tune of their choice, and then the twins are doing the funeral march.
Really long. Yeah, I was like, that's funny. Like I wanted, because like in the audiobook, he sings you a tune, one of the words, and like first off, the words to the song is like, what? Like, I love your school song. Like, you really took this seriously. You guys somebody had a sense of humor about this. But then the fact that they could all sing it to their own tune, I wanted to hear what that would have sounded like. Having all these people sing the same words to the same song, but completely different tunes. And I would have loved hearing that funeral march of, George and Fred being like, oh, and everyone else is just sitting there waiting for them to finish.
Well, and that Dumbledore was just like leading them in the last few lines. He was totally happy. He was like, yay, that was wonderful. Like,
yeah. So one of the things that we know from the movies is they end up, replacing the actor that played Dumbledore because he passed away. And so how do you feel about the Dumbledore in the first movie versus the character in the book? Like, how do you feel like that actor did?
I actually feel like he was perfect for the dialogue. I feel like his voice, his intonation, even like the little hints that he gives with his eyes, perfect. because because I had seen the movies when the fourth movie came out, and I was like, wait a minute. Like, somehow I made that, I don't know. I couldn't figure out how Dumbledore became more active. And
yeah, so like he's got like, so was it later in the movie? Some reason I remembered it as being that he was just in the first movie. Is it the fourth movie?
I don't know. I just noticed in the fourth movie, suddenly he was like running down the stairs, and
Brian.
Voice was totally different from the cute little things he was saying in the first movie. Like when
grandpa.
Yeah, the very end of the movie when he takes the bean, the Bernie Bott's bean, and he's like, alas, earwax. I don't know if he would have been up for running around and climbing on rocks, all the crazy things that Dumbledore does later. I don't know if that actor
could have done that.
Yeah.
Probably not. I do think that he's a fine actor to start with. But yeah, I feel like he wasn't a threatening character in any way. Whereas I felt like they're like, oh, well, Dumbledore's the only person that Voldemort was ever scared of. And you're like, from the movie, you're kind of like, well, why? I feel like you could shove him over if you blew on him too hard. Like, he just feels like this really old, sleepy guy. You know, he doesn't come off as really wise until they have the whole conversation about the mirror. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of like, okay, there's a little more going on there. He's not just an old grandfathery, half out of his mind wizard.
That's another thing that they took out of the that welcome banquet, whatever that was, the start of their banquet, was when he says, oh, I'd like to say a few words. And he's like, nitwit, or whatever. Like, he like says the random words.
Like, what?
And then he just sits back there. I'm like, see that like funny, goofy guy? Like, I like that Dumbledore.
That sounds like the old crazy grandpa. Like, I had a grandpa that like he is missing the first part of his the upper part of his thumb, I think from World War II. And but he always had a different story for me about how he lost that thumb. It's like one time he was like following a puppy's tail with his thumb and it turned around and it bit it off. And there was another time where he was picking his nose and his thumb didn't come back. And
that's what I choose to believe.
You know, it's a different story all the time. I'm not exactly sure how he actually lost his thumb, but that's kind of but yeah, he kind of reminded me of my grandpa and his very silly grandpa-iness. So yeah, like I think it's like the Goblet of Fire where we start to see him like kind of rushing downstairs and being like, oh, that Dumbledore feels a lot more threatening. You can imagine him having been like not so much a scary, but like a formidable and strong wizard once upon a time. Yeah. Whereas this Dumbledore, it's like he just kind of feels like a Sword and Stone cartoon Merlin kind of wizard. Yeah.
Which I like. That was my favorite Merlin. So
anything else that comes to mind or that you noticed?
Oh. I am so happy there's no Peeves. I hate Peeves. I hate that character.
Yeah, so I got really confused about Peeves. So I kept trying to remember him from the movie and be like, who's Peeves? And I was like, and there was moments where it sounded like he was a regular person and other times where he's a ghost.
The poltergeist, yeah.
The poltergeist. Okay, he's Peeves. That's right. Okay, the poltergeist. Now I remember they talked about they're going upstairs and they saw some things moving around. And they're like, is that the poltergeist, Peeves? And he's like, oh, yeah. So I have to agree with you. I didn't feel like he added anything to the story. So I'm kind of glad he's not in the movie.
Yeah.
Especially since like his presence was just confusing at times because I had to keep reminding myself, who is this person again?
I feel like he kind of dies away as the story progresses.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the one with Umbridge, whichever one that is, spoiler, nobody hasn't seen those yet, but in the book, she kicks him out. And so how she's like changing everything and she kicks him out. And I was like, oh, yay, a thing she did that I liked. Because I didn't like him.
That's funny.
I think we've about covered it. I feel like I could probably keep talking forever. I love the casting. I feel like the casting was pretty much perfect, even though like the Dursleys weren't blonde and Harry's eyes weren't green. stuff like that. I don't care because they did their homework. They picked the perfect people for those spots. Oh, you're also saying how Dumbledore passed. I feel like later on we get a different Flitwick as well. The little guy, the little like, I don't know if he's supposed to be a gnome or a goblin, but he's like a super duper old guy with like big old honking ears.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, it's just like a little person with maybe elfish ears or something.
Hmm.
And I was like,
yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I'd have to like go back and look at that.
I had forgotten what, like when they showed him on the movie, because it's been so long since I've seen the first one. And I was like, okay, I don't even remember. Oh, that's Flitwick. Oh, because he looks so different from how he looks on later on. So,
okay.
but generally, I feel like the casting was very well done.
Yeah.
I was really happy with that.
Yeah, I noticed that thing too with the Dursley not being blonde, but like it wasn't that big of a deal. Like it wasn't like it played that much into their character.
Right.
But I do like that they kept fairly true to the main characters and what looked like the Weasleys were all redheads. They kept with that. You know, Harry Potter still has like the basic look that
He still has really piercing eyes. Like you are drawn to his eyes. It doesn't matter to me that they aren't technically green. I guess they originally had given Daniel Radcliffe color contacts to wear. They were hurting his eyes so much that they threw him out. Same thing with like Hermione's. Hermione's
before they're not fun.
Yeah. I've never worn I have contacts for like my vision, but
they're different. Like I wore some yellow ones for so at a Comic-Con, I did a booth with a bunch of authors at a Comic-Con. Because I'm an author again, if I told anybody that. I said that, right? Right. Anyway, with a bunch of authors, we did a booth and I dressed up as the fairy from my books, Morna, and she's blue skinned and she has yellow eyes and blonde hair. And so I did the yellow eyes, I got the contacts, and they were not like regular eye contacts at all. They were one, I couldn't really see in them. Like you can get prescription ones so you can still see, but I didn't have the money for that. So I just went for like the cheap colored ones. So I was fairly blind because I can't see anything past here without assistance in real life. So everything's blurry. I'm talking to people and I'm trying not to make the weird scrunchy faces I used to make when I was a kid and I refused to wear my glasses. I just looked like I was angry all the time. But I was trying to like focus and see who it was I was talking to. But yeah, they were painful. They were not fun. And I think I wore them like the first day of the Comic-Con and I didn't wear them the second or third day because I was like, nope, not fun.
I had a friend in high school that he used to just put like food coloring in the solution for his regular contacts.
Oh, wow.
His contacts were like bright blue, but then they're bigger than the iris of your eye. And so he had this weird like light blue circle and then the piercing blue eye. I'm like, nope, that's just weird.
That sounds funny.
I like the movie. I feel like it stands on its own. Like I can understand the whole story just by watching the movie. I'm not sitting there going, what? And then people go, well, if you read the book, you would know. There's none of that. I felt like
yeah.
You know,
there were some things that were like it made more sense in the book and it was better explained. Like there were moments where they kind of jumped from, well, this means this. So like the whole thing with them figuring out that the person that gave him the dragon was, somebody was giving him the dragon for a reason and there was something nefarious going on, and that the whole, that made more sense in the book. One of my things I find confusing though is that they never quite explained, or maybe they did and I didn't fully get it, but they never quite explained why Snape was acting so suspicious all the time. Like it seemed like Snape was trying to get Sorcerer's Stone. Whereas it turns out he was trying to stop the other guy from getting it, but he also seemed like he didn't know for sure what Quill was doing. Because like, if he knew for sure that Quill was a host for Voldemort, he would have said something or done something more than he did. So
Quirrell does mention it at the end. He's like, "Oh, if Snape hadn't stopped me," like he mentions it, but it almost felt like an afterthought in the movie. Like it did kind of feel like, oh shoot, we got to tie up this loose end. Here you go.
I have to say, I think there couldn't possibly be a better Snape's.
Love Alan Rickman anyway.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite actors. I'm so sad he's not around anymore because he was a treasure. But he's just so perfect for that part, and he did it so well. They're almost like, who else could possibly have played it?
Right. Well, and now we know, like it's been out there now, so I'm not giving away the game, but that Rowling was aside with him in the very beginning and told him the reveal at the end of the story about his character, what his purpose, why he's doing what he's doing. And so you can see, like, now that we know, and you go back and you watch the first movie, you see it in every frame that he's in. He has that, like, man, I hate your dad. Also, dang it, I see your mom. Like, you see that in
I love you because you're your mom's child, but I hate you because you're your father's child. I have feelings towards you.
Yes. And I was talking to my husband about it, that like when he first meets Harry and he is kind of like pointing him out and being like, oh, you don't know Jack, but he sits right down and he looks him in the eye and looking into the mother's eyes, right? And he starts to say, a bezoar can cure most poisons and this is whatever and blah, blah, blah. And he's telling him all these things. And I'm like, if I secretly wanted to help someone and I didn't know how, but I knew there was a bad person out to get them, I would want them to know that a bezoar is found in the belly of a goat and can cure most poisons. I would want him to know that monkshood and wolfsbane and like I would want him to know the basics. So even though they weren't going to get to those, maybe not even in this year, and certainly not on the first day, now Harry has that little bit of like,
yeah,
help you out as much as I can without revealing that I'm helping you out. You know what I mean? And so I'm like, I don't know that that's what's happening, but I feel like that might have been something in Rowling's mind as she was creating the scenario with Snape. Yeah. But yeah, I thought he did excellent. He acts with every like end of his hairs. Like
he is Snape. So the other person I thought was really good. I really liked Maggie Smith as Professor McGonagall. And here's my thing about Maggie Smith. I don't think that woman has ever looked young. She looked ancient way back when. She's just an old person.
Look up her early modeling photos, and she's gorgeous. Like, I still think she's a very handsome older woman. Like, I would love to look like her when I'm half her age.
She's not a bad looking woman at all. No.
I was surprised. I was like, wow. Well, I guess I wasn't surprised, but I was just like stunned at how
I could also look up early model poses or pictures of her. But like when I think of her, I think the earliest fact that I remember from her is like I want to say Clash of the Titans, because she plays one of the goddesses, and then also she plays one of the head maid in the Secret Garden. And these were some time ago, and she looked exactly the same as she does in the Harry Potter movies, which are sometime later. And you're like, you haven't aged.
Definitely has a
look about her.
Very specific look, but I mean, the heck of a look. I'd be happy with it.
I think I've always liked her in everything that I've seen her in. But like, that's one of the things. Every time I see her, I go, she's always looked the same age. Like, just, I think some people are like that. I feel the same way about Susan Sarandon. I don't feel like she's ever looked young. Like she's not like super old looking, but she's had the same look forever. Like some people they don't notably age per se.
So we were talking about Alan Rickman before, and every time I don't know why I do this to myself, but every time that I see Alan Rickman in anything else, I think of him as Rasputin.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen that. I think it's just called Rasputin. I don't even remember what the movie was. I would like to say that it is the movie Rasputin.
Okay. But I'm not sure if I have, but I generally think of him from Die Hard. That's where like my mind first goes.
I did until I saw Rasputin. And
then
I'm like, it's not a huge step from Rasputin to Snape. Like, I feel like he kind of, it wasn't hard
his
for him.
wheelhouse right there. Yeah. He does that so well. He's a good bad guy.
Did you end up with having crushes on any of the characters? I felt
Well,
like there was.
I'm a grown woman. I did not read this when I was a young child. I didn't even read it when I was a teenager, and it still would have been creepy then because they were 11-year-olds. But no, no crushes, not my types. But like, I definitely could have seen if I had read this back in the day, because I have a thing for blonde, blue-eyed men liking Malfoy. And the actor was extremely cute as a little kid. Like, he grew up and he's still a handsome guy, but like, I don't know if you've seen pictures of the cast later on, but Neville is actually the best looking one now. Like, he's the stud now, where he was kind of like the frumpy kid, and then like he grew up to be the tallest one, and he's like really handsome. Daniel Radcliffe, and of course, I'm not going to remember Malfoy's name right now. They're not really tall guys, but they're still good looking guys. But for some reason, you see the picture and you're like, oh my gosh, Neville's the babe. You would never expected that when they were little kids.
Since I saw the movies, when I saw them, I was in high school or just out, because I was working at theater. And so I was like, yeah, there's no, I don't know. I don't like to say that I was boy crazy, but
you were. You were boy crazy. I was boy crazy in a weird way.
Like all the boys, I would always be like, pick one. And I'm like, yep, I love you.
That's the boy. I have devoted my life to you.
And then because
I know, we were in love with the same boy. That's how we became friends, oddly enough. Of all the things to become friends over.
And then, our friendship way outlasted that. But
yeah,
somebody had asked me, they're like, oh, but all the boys are so cute. And I'm like, I don't know. At like 15, 16, 17, I don't really care about the 11 and 12-year-olds. But I was like, the twins are the ones that like I would totally hang out with them and then probably end up having a crush on them, or at least one of them. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, that would totally be me, because I'd be like, they're hilarious. They don't care. Also, somehow they get good marks still. Like,
you're like,
they do the work, but they're like, hey, I did the work. I was that person. I was like,
play. Yeah.
I was like, a D- passes because I go to public school. So D- and I'm out,
It works for me.
I got a C on that test. I'm amazing.
That's great. That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, when you think about the twins, they're they're kind of cute in the first movie, but as they get older, they get kind of like really handsome. And at first, they're like just typical redheaded little guys, and they are hilarious. I love them in the books. They did have a lot of great moments, and they do throughout the movies. They really do add a lot to the story, and they kind of give it more of like a sense of fullness. But I've seen movies where they talk about somebody coming from a big family, and then you maybe meet a couple of them or have some of their siblings mentioned, and then that's it. And coming from a big family, I know how literally every person in your family has some kind of effect on you and how that shapes who you are. And I feel like seeing all the other people in Ron's family and seeing all those little aspects of their personalities and the mom and the dad, I feel like that really makes Ron a stronger character.
Right.
Louise is just so much more interesting because we get to know so many of them.
And you only see Molly, the mom, in the very beginning of the book and the movie, although she is kind of brought up several times, like at Christmas and stuff. I love her. Like, I love my own mom. And in many ways, I do not resemble her, but you know what I mean? Like, I emulate my mom. But frankly, I emulate Molly in a lot of ways too. I'm like, yep, that's the kind of mom I want to be. The one that, like, I love my kids. My house might be a mess, but you know what? I've got crocheting going on in the corner. Like,
yeah,
I actually learned how to crochet. I'm like, I'm going to be the mom that crochets. And I learned how to do it. And I'm like, this takes forever. And I feel like I'm not getting anything done. But if I had a magic wand and I could magic it,
Yeah, see, there's a lot of things I do if I could magically do them. That'd be amazing. Yeah, I think Molly's a really strong character, even though you see her only just a little bit. You get a very strong sense of who she is right away, especially with the interaction between her and the twins and everything. And I think that's one of the things that J.K. Rowling did really well. I feel like dialogue's really well, characterization's really good. There is a strong world building. But at the same time, when you think about it, she didn't do anything different than was out there. She just kind of made her own little thing. I don't know if you've ever heard of the series The Worst Witch.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that came out in the 70s, and in a lot of ways, it's very similar to this. Mm-hmm. And I remember when these books and movies came out, everybody acted like it was the most original thing ever. Oh my gosh, a wizard school, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I know I've seen something like this before. It's not that original. But then they acted like after Harry Potter came out, well, you can't write a story about somebody going to a witch school or you're copying Harry Potter. And it's like, well, even Harry Potter wasn't the original. A lot of things that people write about, they've been done before. They've got to make it their own in their own way. Yeah.
So Studio C, the what is that called? Sketch comedy show, right? Mm-hmm. So they've done this a couple of times where they've got like Harry Potter is sitting there in, I think he's sitting in like the Three Broomsticks or something. And then like one time Gandalf comes in and he's like, oh, a young man with dark curly hair, dark messy hair who's about to go on an adventure. And he's like, yes, I've only just discovered all the magic that's in the world. And like, he's like, oh, and all the side characters, don't you have a little redheaded sidekick who's, you know, insanely loyal to you and whatever, and like, and they go through and they like are showing all, like he's thinking that this is Dumbledore, and it's really Gandalf, and Gandalf is thinking it's Frodo or Bilbo. I don't remember which one, but like,
yeah,
like, and they show all the similarities, and they did it again with another Harry Potter thing. I don't remember if it was the villains this time, if it was like Voldemort and how his storyline is similar to somebody else. Like they keep doing that. And I know that they're poking fun at the fact that this isn't an original story. But to me, I'm like, every person is original, but also we're all kind of just people. Like we're all kind of a little bit the same.
Mm-hmm.
My story in life is not necessarily super duper exciting. However, it doesn't match anybody else's perfectly either. And so maybe there was a worst witch who didn't know that she was magical and then came into, I can't remember, wasn't she like even her familiar is like not a normal familiar, and like like everything about her is a little bit weird and a little bit terrible, and yet somehow she's also like amazingly good at things. I don't remember. A girl had that story in the 70s, and now a boy has that story in the that late 90s. You know,
exactly. And like we don't know how much, like if that's even was an influence or like an inspiration for her or not, or if it was just totally coincidental. A lot of times there are ideas that people can happen to have. It can be very coincidental where people have the same idea. It doesn't mean they necessarily got them from each other. So.
Right. Okay, I don't remember if it was Brandon Sanderson saying it or if someone was saying it about Brandon Sanderson. Okay. I think it might have been that way. Another author was saying about Brandon Sanderson, like, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, his writing strongly influenced my ideas. However, I'm not just writing his fan fiction. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, yeah, that is possible. Tolkien inspired a ton of people. I don't know if people have read Terry Brooks, but a lot of times people say early Terry Brooks feels like Tolkien, and I'm like, well, which came first? I don't even know. And it doesn't really even matter because they're both like really good. I feel like they came out around the same time that I know of.
Well, Tolkien, he was in World War II. That's where a lot of his inspiration for a lot of things came from. So I'm pretty sure Tolkien came first, but I'm like not 100% sure. But even then, it's like, yeah, he might have done it first, but that doesn't mean that he owns all those types of characters. Like elves or vampires, are you always copying somebody else? These are things that have existed in mythology for a long time or different places in the world. So it's not like it's new. It's just about making it your own.
And it's the whole hero's journey. Like, I think that might have been these parodies that I'm talking about, where they're like, oh, mixing, Gandalf and Harry Potter. It's the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Here's the hero. Here's what he goes through. His companions. Does someone betray him? You can see Snape is not naturally a good guy. He's not. Even though I loved him, maybe because Alan Rickman was Snape, but I'm like, I decided that it's too easy. He has to be a red herring. It's too easy for him to be like the bad guy.
Yeah, of course.
And so I'm like, so therefore I love him, but he has to choose to be good. I kind of feel like Harry's never gonna, he might do the wrong thing, as in like he pulls a prank or he sneaks out of bed or whatever.
He's a little headstrong. Yeah.
Yeah. He's never going to
be the bad guy. Yeah.
Whereas Snape can be the bad guy, and maybe was the bad guy, and has to make the choice to be good. And as you go through the story, you meet other characters that are like that. And I like those characters better. Like, I naturally gravitate towards those characters. That true. I was thinking about that with actually with your books, how Gwen could be, she could be bad. She could be the most bad. And
yeah,
he has to make choices. You know what I mean? And I like those characters a little bit better. Like I said, like, I feel like sometimes Harry kind of Mary Sue's through things a little bit. He's just like, la 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 la, what's this? I'm amazing. La 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 la, oh no, this hard thing that I'm not good at, but you all love me, so I did it anyway. Like,
Well, I thought this was fun. I had a good time doing this. What book do you want to talk about next? Like, I picked this book. What book would you do?
I love Jane Austen, and I want to do them all. However, I feel like Pride and Prejudice has a lot of awareness and a lot of adaptations.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a pretty good one. And also, my daughter is reading it right now, and so I know where the book is. She's reading it for school, so
there you go. Yeah, that's one of my favorites, and definitely a lot of interesting adaptations. I don't know which one you would want to talk about, but I have feelings about all the ones I've seen.
I was gonna say, I think I've seen 4, and I like them all.
I can think of 3. So yeah, definitely Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen, whichever. We'll talk about all the adaptations, I guess. I mean,
I'll watch them all. That doesn't hurt my feelings.
Yeah, I have no problem watching the 6-hour A&E miniseries a billion times. I would watch that.
I just barely saw that for my sister was like, I know you like this story. You need to see the whole thing. I'm like, okay. So I've been going over to her house. We actually just finished it like a week before you and I started talking about doing Harry Potter.
Oh, okay. So you've seen it.
I've seen it now. Yeah.
Yeah. So next time we'll talk about that. We're also talking about having some indie authors come on and talk about their books. Thinking of calling it kind of like an indie author revolution spotlight kind of a thing. I'm an indie author, and we're big supporters of independent art, especially since it seems like film has gotten its independent industry, has indie films. Music has that, but it feels like in publishing, even though it has been a revolution of self-publishing and smaller indie publishing houses, a lot of people still sort of look at it like it's not legitimate, whereas you don't feel that way about independent film and Sundance and film festivals, right? So I'd like to show some more support for other indie authors and get more exposure for them and share the love, so to say.
Yeah, that's something I feel like everyone else has their network, and indie authors have networks with other indie authors, and I feel like, but that's just like a circle.
Yeah. To share the love and get more people reading these great authors. There's a lot of really great books, a lot of great movies, a lot of great things that I've seen or experienced that were, by the underdog or little known people. And I feel like sometimes they're better. And when people want to make a big fuss about, well, when it's published by a big publishing house, it's perfect and there's no errors, and that's a lie. I've seen so many errors in traditionally published books. It's not true. And if that's all you're judging a book by, is whether or not it has errors, you're missing a lot of the point of
Right.
the book.
And a lot of times the publishing company is looking for what it's looking for,
Yeah.
and you might change your work to fit their desires. And I like better. That's another thing that I was talking about Sanderson a minute ago, that he was influencing somebody, and that was something that he has talked about, that he had this work that he wanted to do, and I don't remember the whole story. I'm very bad at quotes apparently, but he like, because I wasn't prepared to talk about it.
Summarizing though.
But yeah, and he was like, I really had this work, and I gave it to everyone, every publisher I could find, anybody, large, small,
Mm-hmm.
you know, good reputation, bad reputation, I don't even care. Just somebody print this work, and they would be like, you know, you did this other thing that, I mean, if you could do another short story like this or whatever. And so he was getting some short stories out, or they were telling him what they wanted, and so he was giving it to him. He's like, it was just it was like, it was killing my soul, you know?
Yeah, it's like you're an author for hire instead of, an artist.
Right. And so he just wrote it. I don't need to go into it, but he just wrote it just for himself, which is kind of similar to Harry Potter. Like, Rowling was like, I was at the end of all things. I was at the end of my ability to function.
Welfare. She was in a bad place. She was making up stories to tell her kids, and then she turned it into a book.
Right. And that's kind of what Sanderson did too. And then he ultimately didn't publish it until, like, I think a decade later or something like that, which I was like, and then he was like, so now I've got it printed if you want it. Or like, I'm like, I'm getting this.
Yeah.
Because that was it. That, even though the story has completely changed, now it's Stormlight Archive, for anybody who's aware of his work.
Mm-hmm.
The Stormlight Archive, he's like, a lot of the names have changed, a lot of the scenarios have changed. It's a very novice piece of work. Also, this is my soul, like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the one that really got him excited about writing, and I totally get that. I feel the same way about the 13 Tribes of Cain series. It was something I was like, oh, I've been writing my whole life, but that was the first one where, like, I felt really passionate about it enough to, like, finish it and, like, get it out there. So yeah, I get that. And well, I've been to a lot of different writing conferences, and there were a lot of people that would say, don't ever publish your first book because it's going to be your worst thing you ever wrote. And I'm like, what? I'm just going to throw that away? I was like, no, I'm sorry. I don't agree with you. I'm going to make it the best it can be. And you know what I mean? Like, some people want to just see the very best. They don't want to watch the process and see the growth. And I think when you look at a body of work, like for an artist, it's fun to look at the beginning of an artist's work, to see their early phases and watch them progress and grow. And I think it's the same with writing. I don't see what's wrong with seeing where they started and enjoying the growth process with them.
Right.
And plus, the idea of not publishing something just because you're like, oh, it's not perfect. Life's not perfect. People aren't perfect. Life's messy. And I think in some ways it makes it more organic if it's imperfect, or if it has, you know what I mean? Like, I think the problem with looking for perfection is you might never publish anything if you're always looking for perfect.
Yeah.
Forever revising.
I feel like it's kind of like pictures, like the moms that never want to be in the pictures because they're fat or they didn't do their makeup or whatever. And I'm like, when you're gone and your kids and your grandkids want that picture with mom or whatever, just give them the picture with mom. They see you every day with no makeup, and
they don't care. Like, they love you for who you are. So they just want to see mom in the picture.
I was always like super skinny, cute girl.
And you were cute. I remember.
But like now, I'm not so skinny as I once was. I have the whole, I'm decades older than I was when I was like, just thought I was just so cute. And so I'm like, yeah, there are days that I'm like, ugh, keep the camera up here, don't go down lower. And then my youngest, like, she's like, why do you always say that you're fat? And I'm like, do I? When she was like, why do you always say you're fat? Like, are you fat? And I was like, nope, and it's not a big deal. Like, even if I feel like I am, nope. Like, I don't want to be that mom. And I kind of feel like it's the same thing with art. My oldest does a lot of sketch art, and then she'll sketch and sketch and sketch, and then she'll just kind of like toss it aside. And she's like, that was just practice. I'm like, okay, but it's still cool.
Yeah.
You know, like, don't just throw it away because it wasn't perfect.
Body of work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't throw away the past. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our little discussion about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Sorcerer's Stone. And join us next time for Pride and Prejudice from Jane Austen, the one and only. I'm Ruth Craddock, and that's... What's your name again? Who are you?
Rae Davidson.
Rae Davidson. I don't always want to call you Gordon. I just don't know if that's ever going to go away.
My middle name, so it's still legally correct. So.
For Paperback Flicks, we will see you next time. Thank you.